The Roman Empire was exhausted after seeing victory against the Sassanids. Heraclius, the emperor, now had a host of reclaimed territories under his control. These lands were ripe with turmoil and full of heretics, monophysites who rejected the Council of Chalcedon. Heraclius was determined to bring these heretics into the fold of his empire. Perhaps like Constantine the Great, he wanted to mend the divide in the church. Instead, Heraclius looked for compromise. The emperor that had found victory through trust in God now forfeited his trust in God. Instead of staying true to the unchanging reality of the faith, he compromised his beliefs to create a new heresy, monothelitism. Heraclius hoped this would bridge the divide between the Church of Christ and the monophysites. Instead, it further shattered the church. Both true Christians and monophysites saw it as a heresy. A council in 681 would declare it as such, and the compromise would fade into obscurity following the tragedy that was about to take hold of Byzantium. Emperor Heraclius, having fell into heresy in order to try and appeal to a populace of heretics, would see defeat at the hands of the Arabs. The Muslims in Arabia were united by their newfound religion of Islam, a false prophecy that was a direct product of Aryan, so-called Christianity. Their quote-unquote prophet had brought together the once divided pagan tribes of the Arabs, and now they were riding out to conquer in his name. Syria would be the first Byzantine province to fall. Heraclius had denied payment to border tribes who had previously served Rome by holding off raids from southern Arabs. These mercenaries were Arabs too, and having been rejected by the empire, felt compelled to take up arms with their newly united brethren. Not only did the Romans rely on these Arab swords for hire in Syria, the land itself was full of Arabs by now. Numerous levies were made up of Arabs who served under the banners of Rome, yet these men didn't see the emperor in Constantinople as their leader. They lacked trust in the Byzantines, so when the Muslims arrived, they were eager to betray Rome and switch sides. Southern Syria fell without much of a fight. Then the Arabs moved for the north, and there was a series of battles culminating at Yarmouk in 636. This battle has been called the most decisive in history. For 6 days, the Romans and the Muslims clashed, and after the dust had settled, the Arabs saw victory. The defeat shattered any hope for the Byzantines to keep hold of the Levant. Though the Romans had more men, the Muslims took up a defensive position. Eager to attack as they did not want the Arabs to be able to strike at Antioch, the Byzantines had made a fatal mistake. Even though the cataphracts would breach the Arab line, the Arabs withdrew quickly behind barriers of hobbled camels. Another Roman attack ensued, but their flank was left open. Arab cavalry quickly took advantage of this opening, and the Romans fled, their force soon broken. With this embarrassing defeat, the Muslims took Damascus as their capital, and the Byzantines practically abandoned the Levant. It is no surprise that the Eastern Roman Empire saw defeat at Yarmouk. This counterattack had been ordered by Heraclius, who was not present with his men as he had been at Nineveh. The heretics stayed home. The Arabs would unfortunately take Jerusalem 2 years later, following a long siege. With Palestine and Syria under their control, the Arabs set out for Egypt. This would be their entrance into North Africa. In 640, the Byzantines came out of their walled cities and set out to give battle to the Muslims who were besieging Egypt. However, the Arabs outmaneuvered the Romans under the cover of night, allowing them to flank and ambush the Byzantines, leading to a slaughter. The remaining garrisons did not set out to give battle after this defeat. The Muslims wanted a battle though, so they tried to tempt the Romans into another ambush. Storming Nikiau, they slaughtered all the inhabitants. This didn't work, so they went and did the same to another village, and then another, and so on, hoping to lure the Byzantines into a fight. Instead, the Eastern Roman Empire could do nothing. The Greeks withdrew to Alexandria, knowing they could only see victory behind the city's walls. They were right. The Arabs attempted an assault and met a bitter defeat. The Romans triumphed in defending Alexandria. There was great hope for the city to stay in Byzantium's hands, as it could be supported by the unmatched Roman navy, and its walls were formidable. Yet Cyrus, the province's new governor, decided that this wasn't the best option for Egypt. Betraying his people, he came out and surrendered all of Egypt to the Muslims. Without having to suffer another bloody defeat, the Arabs got their victory in the form of a peace treaty. This victory could have been short-lived. The Arab garrison was defeated 4 years later after a Byzantine army was landed in the city's port. Confident, the commander decided Alexandria's walls would not bring him victory, but that his army could see triumph outside of it on the field. The commander was wrong. and the Byzantines suffered a crushing defeat outside of the city. The Muslims didn't retake the city that easily though, because the Greeks reinforced it shortly after, and the stage was set for the city to hold out against the Arabs. Unfortunately, these conditions were ruined by a treachery quite similar to the surrender of Cyrus. A Monophysite opened up the gates to Alexandria and let the Muslims flood in, allowing both the Byzantine army and the Egyptian inhabitants to be subject to massacre. Half of the city was destroyed because a heretic was set on getting back at an empire he saw as a persecutor of his faith. After securing Egypt, the Muslims would fall into civil war. This would create the divide between Sunnis and Shiites, and would prevent the Arabs from continuing their conquest further until around 670 AD. Emperor Heraclius died, having lost all of the territory he had fought to reclaim. His efforts to compromise with the Monophysites were an obvious failure, as the heretics he had hoped to win over still saw his state as one of oppression and persecution. Many were eager to fight for the Arabs, unhappy with Heraclius' rule. A bishop had even welcomed the Muslims into Egypt, seeing any leader as better than the Byzantine Heraclius. Though Heraclius would see renown for his early accomplishments against the Persians, he would die a heretic and a failure. Interestingly enough, the Muslims would see him as a great ruler of Rome and even try to paint him as a Muslim convert. These claims do not hold up against historical scrutiny. In reality, the emperor and his court probably did not even know what Islam was. They most likely viewed the Muslims as a new sect of Jews, especially when they opened the city of Jerusalem for Jews to live in again. While the emperor was a heretic, he certainly wouldn't have been open to the Arian claims of Islam as well. The tragedy was not over, however. While the Eastern Roman Empire had seen many defeats, North Africa would soon be taken from Christendom. In the Far East, Persia was under the subjugation of the Muslims as well. The outbreak of the Arabs would eventually reach the city of Constantinople too, only to be repelled. The Arabs would almost take over the entirety of Iberia and occupy Sicily and parts of southern Italy. The failures of Heraclius and the eagerness of heretics to betray the Roman authority had left the entirety of Christian civilization open to the hands of the Muslims, who were eager to conquer after they were done shedding their own blood over a succession brawl.